So if you have that one project and you have the fear of failure, you're gonna try to make it work, any way possible because that's all you have. But if you treat it as this portfolio of ideas, you're gonna know that okay, we need to now. It's time to quickly, shift to this one because we want to provide value, and these other things will come back to them, at the right time, right?
What are some of the indicators of success or the patterns that lead to success as your clients and your partners are evaluating AI, as they're thinking about, transforming processes that may have been part of a digital transformation process a decade ago? What do you look for, and what do you need to make sure exists in the end for a
Mhm.
successful AI project? A nice small question for you.
I love that question. Yeah, I was going to say that is the $1 million question, right? So, I'll start with an example, and it's not maybe a recent example, but I think it illustrates the point, quite well. One of the things that, let's say, in the pre-generative AI era, one of the use cases that seem to be very popular is customer churn, right?
Hmm.
And I would hear that over and over from clients, and at some point I started to put the question back to them and say, let's imagine that the results of the model are just gonna be perfect, right? Just you're gonna know exactly, based on, let's say, the metrics by which we measure, a successful modeling. Let's say it's going to be the best we get. What are you going to do with this new insight? Because
Sure.
you can never
Your,
be
your
sure.
your perfect ability to predict customer churn, wonderful. What are you
Yeah,
actually going to do with it?
what are you going to do with it? Because arguably you're going to need to maybe invest into, let's say, more resources to be giving those customers a call, or you're going to have, some rewards, some incentives. And you would be surprised with how many people actually would do nothing, were prepared to not in, they just couldn't, make additional investments. So that was a signal that if you're not, I think what, to put that back up a level, what that means is if you're not prepared to make changes in your workflows, potentially re-engineer them, change how you are doing things today, then it probably means that you were not ready for, even for a very successful result of AI, which is not always the case, right? So I
Yeah.
think the other thing that you would probably hear quite a bit is that, well, 80% of the use cases never go into production, right? They stay in proof of concept. And you, in those early conversations, you start to see and hear, those who are looking at proof of concept as the end goal, or proof of concept as a stage in the process. So
What
yes,
a
great stuff,
man.
right?
What a kind of a depressing world to be in. So if you end up in a world where you realize that the POC is the end goal, like that's the
Yeah,
metric, right? Like that can be fun, that can be creative and inspiring, but you're not going to make any change.
exactly. So
You
I think,
know, something like one of the things in my experience that is almost critical up front is, you're sort of setting aside, you're assessing your problems. Okay, customer churn is a problem, whatever, but you're also need to assess the ability of the organization to do anything about it, which I think is what you're saying, and the relative priority to the organization. Right? If it's ever going to move beyond POC into production, this actually has to really matter. When do you do things like that in the process in your work? Is that upfront work? Is that kind of along the way?
it tends to be upfront work, anytime we can influence it. So we have something that's called, we call it like the AI primer. And it is about understanding what is your business strategy, what are your business priorities, and how do we help clients help themselves, right?
Yeah.
In terms of identifying those priorities. It's very easy to fall in love with with an idea just because it's cool, right? Or
Yeah.
but it's but you need to go back to the basics and say, how does this align to my business strategy and my business priorities? And what am I trying to get from it? So I'll give you an example. Some, for sure, some, and of course that changes, depending on where business is at. But for some companies, like, the most important thing is short-term savings, right? And, like, just eliminate cost. There could be other points in their history where the most important thing is competitive advantage. There could
Hmm.
be others where the most important thing is really talent attraction. Or in other case, it is about efficiencies and it's those long-term, savings. But if you're looking for, so let's say, if you've promised to your shareholders that you're going to be, so that the return is going to be immediate return, or term return is going to be higher, you're going to be looking for certain types of use cases where you can cut costs. So that doesn't tend to be necessarily people, but it tends to be maybe where there are contracts. For example, even supply chain, right? So where there
Sure.
are contracts where we could immediately optimize those costs, or where are maybe route optimization for vehicle fleet management, where we can maybe optimize some of those routes and then reduce fuel consumption or things like those, that can lead to immediate savings. So I think there's a bit of a method to the madness to be able to align the specific things you're going to be working on, back to the business strategy and business outcomes. Because if you do not, even if those are very successful, they may never see the light of day, in terms of operationalization, because just it's a nice thing, good
It's
results.
it's nice to have, right? It's the painkiller, but or the vitamin, not the painkiller. Um, but okay, so I want to challenge you on one thing though, because I
Mhm.
think I I fundamentally agree with you, and I actually see the biggest mistake that a lot of folks make that I talk to is falling in love with the idea, to use your words, or falling in love with a potential solution and not really evaluating, does the problem matter, and falling in love with the problem. I think I've got the book behind me, Falling in Love with the Problem. But there is something to being exploratory, to immersing yourself in what's possible, to experimenting, and then, realizing that you might be able to do something that dramatically um, changes the priority of the problem, right? Like, okay, so we're trying to manage customer churn. We don't actually have a way to intervene, even if we know someone's churning. But oh, it turns out that there's an AI driven voice contact center that's incredibly friendly, that at zero incremental cost can, call people at risk of churn and provide them an offer, right? And that wasn't possible before. So how do you balance the kind of being sober upfront about the importance of the problem with being exploratory, experimental, optimistic, and nerdy, frankly, to try and see if maybe there's something out there that will change the priority?
I love that, that question too, because it is, so any one of the preferable, and I think what I have seen the most success in this space is when, companies treat that innovation, capability not as a one project, right, but as a capability and as a roadmap of projects and ideas. So ideas can be big and small, and the life cycle in how you're going to implement them always needs to have that experimentation. But it could be that what you learn in that experimentation phase is that, we're not quite ready for it now, but we're going to bring it back.
Yeah.
Let's say X time from now, because there's a lot of potential here. We know that it doesn't, us being very busy with this idea for the next year is not going to really, make it work. But we want to get back to this because there's a lot of potential here. So you have to nurture innovation capability and organize your innovation processes in a way that it allows for that. It's a portfolio of ideas versus the one discrete idea that you take on as most people, I'd say most companies still do that it's a discrete project. The challenge with tackling it as a discrete project is that there's always there's the perception, the fear of failure is a big thing, of
Of
course, right?
course.
So if you have that one project and you have the fear of failure, which is very very
All your eggs are in
common,
one basket. You're never going to take any risks.
you're gonna try to make it work,
Yeah.
any way possible because that's all you have. But if you treat it as this portfolio of ideas, you're gonna know that okay, we need to now. It's time to quickly, shift to this one because we want to provide value, and these other things will come back to them, at the right time, right?